The rise and fall of the Wolfpacks, silent hunters of the Atlantic. The story of the Wolfpacks during World War II is one of extraordinary naval warfare, strategy, and the eventual downfall of one of the most feared forces in the Battle of the Atlantic. This narrative is sponsored by Polly Speaks For You. At Polly Speaks For You, we are driven by a passion for empowering individuals, particularly those with disabilities or learning challenges, through innovative text-to-speech and voice recognition technology. Polly Speaks For You is more than just software, it's a lifeline that bridges the gap, enabling people to express themselves and connect with the world in impactful ways. By merging the richness of history with cutting-edge technology, Polly Speaks For You shows how every voice, whether preserving the past or shaping the future, has the power to inspire. Thank you for watching, and now, back to the story. Origins of the Wolfpacks. In the early years of World War II, the Kriegsmarine, Nazi Germany's navy, heavily relied on their U-boats, undersea boots, which are submarines, to cut off Allied supply lines across the Atlantic Ocean. Recognizing the immense strategic importance of these supply routes, particularly the convoy system that transported food, fuel, and munitions from North America to Britain and the Soviet Union, Germany aimed to choke Britain into submission through a form of unrestricted submarine warfare. The Wolfpack tactic, devised by Admiral Karl Dornitz, was the key to this strategy. Rather than operating independently, U-boats would form large groups, known as Wolfpacks, Rudel in German. These packs, usually consisting of 8 to 20 submarines, would lie in wait across the Atlantic. When an Allied convoy was spotted, the U-boat that made the sighting would radio for reinforcements. The pack would then converge on the convoy, attacking under the cover of darkness from multiple angles. These nighttime assaults were terrifyingly effective. Between 1940 and 1942, the Wolfpacks wreaked havoc on Allied shipping. Convoys were systematically attacked, with hundreds of merchant ships sunk, leaving vital supplies at the bottom of the Atlantic. The U-boats proved to be a terrifying and invisible threat, as their submerged attacks made them difficult to detect and counter, earning them the nickname the Grey Wolves. The tide turns. By 1942, the Wolfpacks seemed invincible. But as the Allies adapted, the tide of battle began to turn. Several factors led to the eventual destruction of the Wolfpacks. 1. Technological advancements. The Allies made tremendous strides in anti-submarine technology. The development of radar and sonar, called ASDIC in the Royal Navy, allowed for early detection of U-boats, even when submerged. Additionally, Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars and depth charges became more effective weapons in hunting down U-boats. 2. Cryptography and intelligence. Perhaps the most significant factor was the breaking of the German Enigma code by the British cryptographers at Bletchley Park. Led by Alan Turing and his team, the Allies were able to intercept and decode encrypted messages sent between U-boats and their command. This allowed them to anticipate and counter Wolfpack attacks by rerouting convoys or setting traps for the submarines. 3. Air power. The introduction of long-range patrol aircraft, such as the consolidated B-24 Liberator, allowed the Allies to extend their air coverage over the previously vulnerable mid-Atlantic gap. These aircraft could spot U-boats on the surface, forcing them to submerge, limiting their speed and mobility. Escort carriers also brought air power closer to convoys. 4. Convoy escorts. The Allies increased the use of escort destroyers and corvettes to protect their convoys. These ships were designed specifically to counter the U-boat threat, with sonar systems to detect submarines and depth charges to destroy them. The cooperation between ships and aircraft became more effective, with hunter-killer groups specifically tasked with seeking out and destroying U-boats. The destruction of the Wolfpacks. By 1943, the combined Allied efforts began to bear fruit. The Battle of the Atlantic reached its turning point in what became known as Black May of 1943. During this period, the Allies sank an unprecedented number of U-boats, dealing a severe blow to the German submarine fleet. In May alone, 43 U-boats were destroyed, amounting to nearly a quarter of Germany's operational U-boat force. The Allies' success was so overwhelming that Admiral Dornitz was forced to recall most of the remaining U-boats from the Atlantic to avoid further catastrophic losses. From this point onward, the Wolfpacks were effectively neutralized. Although U-boat operations continued sporadically until the end of the war, they never again posed the same level of threat to the Atlantic convoys. Legacy. The Wolfpacks of the Atlantic became one of the most dramatic symbols of submarine warfare in World War II. From 1939 to 1945, over 3,000 Allied merchant ships were sunk by U-boats, but by the end of the war, more than 750 U-boats had been destroyed. The destruction of the Wolfpacks marked a significant turning point in the war, allowing vital supplies to continue flowing to Britain and the Soviet Union, contributing to the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany. The Battle of the Atlantic is often referred to as the longest continuous military campaign of World War II, and the downfall of the Wolfpacks remains a testament to the strategic, technological, and cooperative prowess of the Allied forces. The Wolfpack. April 1942, North Atlantic. German U-boat Command HQ, Kiel, Germany. Message sent via radio encryption to U-boat fleet. Operation Seawolf commences. 12 boats assigned to the Northern Corridor, northeast of Newfoundland. Enemy convoy expected 23rd of April. We strike at dusk. Maximum stealth and surprise. No mercy. U-boat commanders, remain in radio silence. Acknowledge and proceed with operational security. Dornitz. U-boat U-101, Mid-Atlantic, night the 23rd of April, 1942. The moonlight barely pierced the grey clouds above the vast, cold expanse of the North Atlantic. On board U-101, the hum of the diesel engines was barely audible beneath the surface as the crew maintained their silent watch. Captain Hans Muller stood near the control room, eyes fixed on the sonar scope. "Contact," whispered First Officer Johann. The tension in the air was palpable. Muller's hands clenched around the rail as the sonar operator traced the outline of a convoy, a long line of merchant ships, unaware of the danger creeping toward them. The Wolfpack was closing in. Radio message received at 0230 hours from U-108 to U-101. Enemy sighted. Convoy in sight, heading west. Estimated distance 40 kilometers. Standing by for attack. Shall we engage? Muller, looking at the distant shadow of U-108's mast through the periscope, made a swift decision. Negative. Hold position. Let them close in. We attack at once, together. Diary entry: First Officer Johann, U-101. The 23rd of April, 1942. We wait in the deep, silent water, a ghost in the ocean. The convoy is unaware of us, drifting along like sheep. My stomach churns with excitement and dread. It will be the first time I see the fire in the sky, the violent explosion of metal. We are waiting for the signal from Captain Muller. I feel the pressure, everything has led to this. Allied Convoy HX-190, North Atlantic, the 23rd of April, 1942. The convoy was led by the British destroyer HMS Javelin. Captain Richard Hale stood on the bridge, scanning the horizon. The icy winds slapped his face as he gripped the railing tightly. "We're passing the coordinates where we lost contact last time," said the officer of the watch. "Do you think the Germans will attack again, sir?" Hale didn't respond immediately, his eyes squinting at the dark waters ahead. "It's inevitable," Hale said, his voice grim. "They won't stop until they sink us." In the convoy's stern, a merchant ship was suddenly rocked by an explosion, sending a plume of water and debris high into the air. The crew was thrown off balance as the vessel listed to one side, smoke rising from its hold. Radio message received by HMS Javelin at 0250 hours from Convoy Commodore. U-boats detected. Begin evasive maneuvers. Full speed ahead. All escorts, prepare depth charges and proceed with aggressive countermeasures. Signal the rest of the convoy to scatter. U-boat U-101, 3 hours. As soon as the first explosion rocked the merchant ship, Muller ordered a full dive. The crew worked with synchronized efficiency, cranking the controls that would take them deeper into the cold depths of the Atlantic. Fire! Muller barked. The torpedo tubes fired in quick succession, and the boat shuddered with each launch. A cacophony of explosions followed. Radio message received from U-108 to U-101, 3:15 hours. Confirmed, 2 hits. Convoy in disarray. We have taken down the merchant vessel Saskatchewan. Proceeding to engage remaining targets. Will remain in radio silence until further orders. Diary entry: Able Seaman Tom Collins, HMS Javelin. The 23rd of April, 1942. I saw it happen with my own eyes. The ship went down so fast. 1 minute it was there, and the next, just gone. We're not even sure where the U-boats are yet, but we know they are out there. The sky is dark, the sea is even darker, and the thought that we could be next gnaws at me. We're doing everything we can to scatter the convoy, but I know that even if we evade them tonight, they'll be back tomorrow. German U-boat U-101, depth, 150 meters, 3:45 hours. The sonar pinged again. U-101 had sunk 2 more ships in rapid succession, but the real target was still out there, the convoy's largest vessel, the Libet. It was the prize. Muller's eyes locked on the sonar reading. He signaled for another attack. Fire! The torpedo shot out, cutting through the water like an arrow. Radio message from U-101 to HQ, 4 hours. 5 ships down. Engaged primary target. Convoy in disarray. Proceeding to shadow remaining survivors. HMS Javelin, 4:15 hours. The British destroyer's crew scrambled to launch depth charges into the cold Atlantic depths. There was a brief moment of silence before the thunderous sound of explosions rocked the ship. But no U-boat surfaced. Captain Hale watched from the bridge, a mixture of anger and fear building in him. They are out there, he muttered. And they are getting bolder. U-boat U-101, 4:30 hours. The U-101 surfaced briefly to assess the damage. The convoys had scattered, but the hunt was far from over. In the distance, U-108 could be seen, its periscope piercing the ocean surface like a wolf's eye. Captain Muller relayed his final orders for the night. Return to formation. Tomorrow, we strike again. These ships won't escape. Diary entry: Captain Hans Muller, U-101. The 24th of April, 1942. Another night of death and victory. The convoy was shattered, destroyed, and yet I feel no satisfaction. Only the bitter taste of necessity. The Führer demands victory, at all costs, and we give him what he asks. The ocean is no longer just a battlefield. It is our kingdom, and we, the wolves who rule it. But I wonder how long we can continue this game of death before the sea itself claims us all. Aftermath: the 25th of April, 1942. The survivors of convoy HX-190 limped into port, battered and shaken. 37 merchant ships had been part of the convoy, and only 16 managed to make it to port. The Allies had lost over 50,000 tons of supplies and merchant ships. But the toll on the German U-boat fleet was also high. As effective as the Wolfpack tactics were, the Allied response was relentless. Dornitz would soon realize that even this method of warfare had its limits. But for now, the Wolfpack had won a victory. Diary entry: Lieutenant Commander John McFarland, Royal Navy. The 26th of April, 1942. We lost too many ships, but we survived. There's nothing glamorous about this war, only the endless struggle to stay afloat. Our ships were sunk, but we still have hope. We will fight on. Certainly. Here's a more action-packed version of the story, focusing on a dramatic engagement between the German Wolfpack and the Allied convoy, with fast-paced, tense moments, radio exchanges, and the personal stakes for the soldiers involved. The Wolfpack's hunt. North Atlantic, the 23rd of April, 1942. U-101, depth, 150 meters, 2:30 a.m. Captain Hans Muller stood silent in the control room of U-101. His eyes, sharp as ever, fixed on the sonar screen. The high-pitched whine of the sonar ping echoed in the cramped, dimly lit compartment. Through the murk of the sea, the silhouette of the convoy was just beginning to emerge, a long line of merchant ships and escorts, unaware of the deadly predator lurking beneath. Contact. First Officer Johann's voice was a low whisper, but it carried the weight of 1,000 battles. They had found their prey. Muller's pulse quickened, but his face remained unreadable. The radio silence was absolute. His orders were clear: strike fast, strike hard. We wait for the signal, he said, voice tight. The others will be in position soon. We attack together. Radio message received at 2:40 a.m. from U-108 to U-101. Enemy sighted. All boats, prepare to engage. Coordinates confirmed. We strike together at 3 o'clock. Over. HMS Javelin, convoy HX-190, 2:50 a.m. Captain Richard Hale stood on the bridge of Javelin, staring out into the abyss of the North Atlantic. The night was eerily still, with nothing but the sound of the wind and the waves. The convoy was tightly packed, the merchant ships flanked by their escorts. They had made it past the worst of the U-boat-infested waters, so they thought. Suddenly, the calm was shattered by a sharp, deafening crack, an explosion, too close for comfort. A cloud of smoke erupted from the side of the nearest merchant ship, Saskatchewan, as the blast sent splinters of metal and wood flying. U-boats, yelled the officer of the watch. They are here. Hale's instincts kicked in. He grabbed the radio handset, his voice booming. All ships, scatter. Full speed ahead. We're under attack. U-101, 3 a.m. The ocean around U-101 was a labyrinth of shifting shadows and boiling foam. The convoy had just begun to break apart in a frantic scramble for survival, but Muller knew better. A panicked convoy was a doomed convoy. The Wolfpack would have its feast. Ready to fire. Johann called, his fingers poised on the torpedo controls. The crew held their breath as the tension built to a crescendo. Fire. Muller barked. The first torpedo shot from the tube, slicing through the water like a knife. Moments later, the sound of a distant explosion reached their ears, a deep, thunderous boom followed by a violent shake of the boat. Radio message received from U-108 to U-101 at 3:05 a.m. Direct hit. Saskatchewan is sinking. We've got them in disarray. Prepare for second strike. Over. HMS Javelin, 3:10 a.m. Another one's gone, a sailor shouted as smoke billowed from a crippled freighter, the Saskatchewan sinking rapidly. The remaining ships were in full panic mode now, their escorts desperately trying to form a protective screen. Hale gritted his teeth. Steady, men. We'll fight back. Prepare depth charges. Another explosion. Another ship gone. The convoy was breaking apart faster than Hale could organize the defense. His radio crackled with frantic messages from the merchant ships. "We're hit. We're sinking. Abandon ship. Keep together." Hale barked, but he knew T was already too late. U-101's periscope emerged briefly from the depths, its glass gleaming in the dim light of the moon. Muller's eyes scanned the wreckage, dozens of ships burning in the night. He could almost hear the cries of the sailors from below. "On my mark, fire again," Muller commanded, his voice steady as stone. The torpedoes were fired, streaking toward the heart of the convoy. But this time, the British were ready. Depth charges rained from the escorts. HMS Javelin, 3:20 a.m. Hale was on the bridge, steering the ship away from the incoming torpedoes. The crew worked with frantic urgency, as the ship shook violently under the impact of several near misses. "We've got to get them." Hale gritted his teeth. "Prepare counterattack." "Target identified," the sonar operator shouted. "Bearing 240. U-101. Hale's heart pounded. They had one shot to make it count. "Full speed ahead." "All ahead full," he ordered. "Fire depth charges." U-101, 3:30 a.m. The depth charges exploded above them, rocking the submarine with a violent shock. Inside, men were thrown to the floor. The hull creaked under the pressure. "Hold steady," Muller yelled. "We're not finished yet." With a quick motion, Muller ordered another dive. They shot down into the depths, the sea around them turning pitch black. The sonar pinged again. The convoy was still there, still struggling. But the Wolfpack was circling, patient. It was only a matter of time. Radio message received from U-108 to U-101, 3:45 a.m. "Two more ships down. We're closing in. The convoy is scattered. Time to finish it." HMS Javelin, 3:50 a.m. Another explosion tore through the night. This time, it wasn't the Saskatchewan. It was the Libet, the largest of the convoy's ships. It exploded in a massive fireball that lit up the horizon, its hull splitting in half as the flames reached skyward. "We're losing them," Hale shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. But it wasn't over yet. The Javelin fired a barrage of depth charges as it peeled away from the wreckage, desperate to get away from the predators in the dark. U-101, 4 a.m. The convoy was disintegrating. The remaining ships were either sinking or fleeing in every direction. But there was one target left, Javelin. U-101 closed in for the kill. The crew worked silently, methodically. The torpedo tubes were primed. Muller's fingers hovered over the controls. "Ready," Johann called. Muller gave the command. "Fire." HMS Javelin, 4:05 a.m. Hale saw it in the distance, a torpedo, cutting through the water, aimed directly for Javelin. He could feel it, a gut-wrenching certainty that this was it. "Brace! Brace!" he shouted, but the crew had no time. The explosion was deafening, sending the ship reeling as it was struck amidships. The lights flickered out. Water began pouring in. The Javelin was sinking. U-101, 4:15 a.m. Muller surveyed the aftermath through his periscope. The convoy had been obliterated. 4 ships had sunk, and the Javelin was going down fast. The Wolfpack had struck true. "Return to formation," Muller ordered, his voice calm. "The sea is ours tonight." Radio message received by U-101 from Admiral Dornitz, 4:30 a.m. "Victory confirmed. The enemy has been crushed. Return to port for rest and resupply." Your performance will be noted. Congratulations, Captain Muller. Germany is proud. Diary entry: Able Seaman Tom Collins, HMS Javelin. The 23rd of April, 1942. The sea is cold tonight. Cold and unforgiving. We fought as hard as we could, but there's no escaping the wolves once they've set their sights on you. The Javelin is gone, and I don't know if I'll make it back home. But as long as I can still breathe, I'll keep fighting. We will not surrender. The destruction of the convoy, Wolfpacks' final blow. HMS Javelin, the 23rd of April, 1942. 4:20 a.m. The HMS Javelin was slipping beneath the waves. Water rushed in from the ruptured hull, its once proud form twisted and broken. The crew scrambled to save themselves, the bitter realization of their fate settling in like the icy Atlantic night. Hale, battered and blooded, gripped the rail, refusing to abandon his sinking ship. The torpedo had struck with such force that even seasoned sailors like him were left stunned, gasping for breath as freezing sea water sloshed around their ankles. "Sir! We have to abandon ship," a voice shouted, but Hale could hardly hear it over the roar of the ocean. With great reluctance, he gave the final order. "Abandon ship." As the crew clambered into lifeboats, the reality of their situation set in. This was no longer a battle, it was survival. Above, the stars flickered coldly, indifferent to the struggle below. The ships that remained afloat had scattered like frightened prey, but they too were easy targets for the lurking U-boats. The Atlantic had turned into a graveyard. U-101, 4:25 a.m. Below the surface, the crew of U-101 remained in eerie calm. Captain Muller watched as the HMS Javelin began its final descent into the abyss. It had been a successful raid. The Wolfpack had lived up to its name, silent hunters that tore their prey apart, one by one. "How many confirmed hits?" Muller asked, though he knew the answer was already etched in the wreckage around them. "4 confirmed," Johann responded. "The Javelin is sinking, and only one freighter remains on the horizon." "They are abandoning the convoy?" Muller nodded, his face expressionless. His crew had trained for this moment, ruthless efficiency in the face of chaos. The torpedo had found its mark, just as Dornitz had ordered. But Muller felt no elation, no thrill of victory. The war was becoming a cruel exercise in destruction, endless nights like this one where ships disappeared without a trace. "Surface and prepare to take on survivors," Muller ordered, a rare moment of mercy. "There may be intelligence among the wreckage." The crew followed orders, knowing that every bit of information from the Allied ships could lead to more victories. But even as they prepared to rise, Muller's mind lingered on the toll of the war. How many more ships, how many more lives would be swallowed by the deep? HMS Javelin, 4:35 a.m. In the lifeboat, able seaman Tom Collins could see the tip of the Javelin disappearing beneath the waves. The ship's name, once emblazoned proudly along its side, now vanished into the freezing water, leaving nothing but a swirl of foam in its wake. Around him, the survivors were silent, too shocked or exhausted to speak. Collins held his breath as he scanned the horizon. Fires from the burning wreckage of the convoy ships still flickered in the distance. "Did we lose them all?" a young sailor whispered. "Not yet," Collins muttered. He wasn't sure why he said it, there was little hope left. The convoy was decimated, and the U-boats had all but won this fight. But somewhere, deep inside, Collins refused to accept the finality of defeat. They were British sailors, and they would keep fighting. U-101, 4:40 a.m. The submarine broke the surface, and the men immediately began scouring the debris fields. Muller stepped out onto the conning tower, looking across the dark, debris-strewn waters. Through the gloom, he could see small clusters of lifeboats, survivors. He wondered if they knew what was coming next. These survivors wouldn't be left to their fate. "Prepare to retrieve what we can," Muller ordered. "But stay sharp. We've lingered too long." But as U-101 drifted closer, Muller caught sight of something unusual. A small lifeboat with what looked like hastily scribbled charts scattered around a sailor's lap. Perhaps it was a lucky find, a chance to gather valuable information. As the submarine approached the lifeboat, the crew inside braced for the worst, but instead, Muller ordered his men to hold their fire. "Let's see what they know." Collins, sitting in the boat, stared up at the imposing figure of the U-boat captain. He knew they were at the mercy of the enemy now. But he wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of fear. "Come to finish the job," he muttered under his breath. U-101, 4:50 a.m. But before Muller could give his final command, a crackle on the radio broke the stillness. "Urgent orders from High Command. Withdraw immediately. Allied destroyers inbound." Muller's heart sank. Allied forces had learned of their position, and he couldn't afford to stay any longer. He had to abandon the mission, leaving whatever intelligence or survivors there might be. "Take us under," Muller ordered. The engines of U-101 roared to life as the submarine slipped back into the abyss. The sea claimed its silence once again. HMS Javelin, 5 a.m. As dawn broke over the Atlantic, the remnants of the convoy lay scattered across the horizon. HMS Javelin was gone, swallowed by the waves. But in the lifeboats, sailors like Tom Collins sat silently, waiting. The British had lost the battle, but the war was far from over. The battle with the Wolfpacks had shown the raw, brutal power of submarine warfare, but even in the face of overwhelming odds, the survivors clung to one truth: as long as they lived, they would fight. The Wolfpacks had won the night, but the day would belong to the Allies. The last days of the Wolfpacks. North Atlantic, March 1943. For years, the German U-boats had reigned supreme in the vast and unforgiving North Atlantic. The Wolfpacks, as they were known, had terrorized Allied convoys, sinking hundreds of merchant ships carrying vital supplies to Britain. But now, in the bitter cold of early 1943, the tides were finally beginning to turn. U-552, 1 a.m. Captain Lieutenant Eric Top stood in the conning tower of U-552, gazing through the periscope. The waters were eerily calm tonight, but the air was thick with tension. Convoys were better protected now, and Allied air cover extended farther into the Atlantic. The Wolfpacks had suffered heavy losses in recent months, and U-boat captains knew the enemy was growing stronger. "Convoy sighted," Top's first officer whispered. His breath fogged the periscope lens in the freezing air. Top scanned the horizon and spotted the faint outlines of merchant ships, their silhouettes barely visible against the dark sea. "Get ready," Top ordered. The crew moved silently, preparing the torpedoes. It had been weeks since they'd seen real action. Supplies were running low, and morale was sinking like the ships they once hunted so ruthlessly. HMS Courageous, 1:30 a.m. on the British destroyer HMS Courageous, Lieutenant Commander Robert Sykes was on high alert. Intelligence had warned them that U-boats were still operating in the area. The Courageous had been dispatched to protect the convoy at all costs. "Sonar contact, sir," the sonar operator called out, his voice tense. "Possible U-boat, bearing 270. Sykes reacted immediately. "Full speed ahead. Prepare depth charges." He knew they had to act fast. The Germans were still deadly, but they were no longer invincible. U-552, 1:35 a.m. Top's heart raced as the torpedo tubes were primed. He knew this could be one of his last opportunities to strike a convoy. The Allies' new radar technology made it harder to operate near the surface, and aircraft carriers had begun deploying long-range patrol planes that hunted U-boats like hawks. "Fire!" Top commanded. A single torpedo streaked through the water, heading for the nearest merchant ship. But before it could hit, a depth charge exploded nearby, rocking U-552. The submarine shook violently, throwing men to the deck. Surface. Surface now. Top ordered, realizing they were under attack. As the U-boat rose to the surface, searchlights from HMS Courageous illuminated them, and the crew braced for impact. HMS Courageous, 1:45 a.m. U-boat sighted, sir, the lookout shouted. Sykes wasted no time. Open fire. The destroyer's deck guns roared to life, and the sea around U-552 erupted in flames and smoke. Top gave the order to dive, but it was too late. Another depth charge detonated beneath them, and U-552's hull cracked. Water rushed in as the U-boat began to sink. Top looked around at his men, exhausted, frozen, and filled with dread. Abandon ship, he shouted, but few would survive the icy waters of the North Atlantic that night. U-boat Command, Lorient, France. Back at U-boat Command in Lorient, Grand Admiral Karl Dornitz, architect of the Wolfpacks, was receiving grim reports. The Allies had cracked the Enigma code, and their convoys were now heavily guarded by destroyers and aircraft. His U-boats were being hunted down with ruthless efficiency. The Battle of the Atlantic, once thought winnable, was slipping through his fingers. He knew the U-boat arm was losing its grip, but he refused to give up. Even in these dark days, Dornitz ordered his captains to keep fighting, to take down as many ships as possible before the tide of war turned completely. U-106, 2 a.m. Not far from where U-552 had met its end, U-106 was running silent, trying to evade detection. Captain Lieutenant Hermann Rask knew the Allies had improved their tactics. Convoys were now protected by destroyer screens and long-range patrol planes. The U-boats had become the hunted. Sonar contact. Destroyer closing fast, the sonar operator whispered urgently. Silent running, Rask ordered. The engines slowed to a crawl, and the crew held their breath. Depth charges detonated in the distance, shaking the U-boat like an earthquake. Rask knew they were cornered. The days of U-boat dominance were over. One by one, the Wolfpacks were being wiped out. There would be no escape this time. HMS Courageous, 2:30 a.m. on the surface, HMS Courageous circled the area where U-106 was last detected. The crew stood ready, depth charges primed, listening for any sign of the U-boat beneath. Nothing on sonar, sir, the operator reported. They've gone deep. But Sykes knew better. He had been hunting U-boats for months now, and he could sense when one was still lurking. Drop another spread, he ordered. A fresh barrage of depth charges was released, and moments later, a massive explosion rumbled from the depths. Target destroyed, the sonar operator confirmed. Sykes allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. The Wolfpacks were being thinned out, but he knew the war was far from over. The end of the Wolfpacks. By May 1943, the tide had fully turned in the Battle of the Atlantic. The Allies had perfected their convoy tactics, using radar, sonar, and long-range aircraft to detect and destroy U-boats before they could strike. The Enigma code had been broken, and the Wolfpacks could no longer operate with impunity. One by one, the U-boats were hunted down and sunk. Those that survived limped back to their bases, their crews exhausted and defeated. The reign of the Wolfpacks had come to an end. For men like Captain Lieutenant Top and Captain Lieutenant Rask, the glory days of 1940 and 1941 were now a distant memory. The U-boat fleet had gone from being Germany's most feared weapon to a symbol of desperation. Diary entry: Lieutenant Commander Robert Sykes, HMS Courageous, the 10th of April, 1943. The sea is quiet tonight. For the first time in months, the convoy moves without fear of U-boats lurking in the depths. We've fought hard to secure this victory, but it's a bitter one. So many lives lost on both sides. The Wolfpacks are broken, but the war goes on. I wonder how long it will be before we see peace. The last days of the Wolfpacks marked a turning point in the war. The Battle of the Atlantic, once a deadly struggle for control of the sea lanes, had been won by the Allies. The U-boats, once the terror of the oceans, had been brought to heel. The wolves had been driven back to their dens, and the convoys sailed on. Epilogue: the wolves fall silent. By the summer of 1943, the once dominant Wolfpacks of the Kriegsmarine were no more. What had started as a campaign of terror on the high seas, with U-boats prowling the Atlantic like predators, had ended in defeat and despair. The toll of the war had been heavy on both sides, countless ships and lives lost, civilian and military alike. But for Germany's U-boat fleet, the end was particularly crushing. In the harbors of Lorient, Brest, and other occupied ports, the remaining U-boats returned, many limping back in battered condition. Their captains, men like Erich Topp and Hermann Rask, had once been hailed as heroes of the Reich. Now they were survivors of a lost cause, their crews weary and haunted by the faces of their fallen comrades. The sea that had been their hunting ground had turned into a graveyard. For Karl Dornitz, the architect of the U-boat strategy, the fall of the Wolfpacks was a bitter blow. He had believed in their ability to starve Britain into submission, but he had underestimated the resilience and ingenuity of the Allies. With their mastery of radar, sonar, and air power, the Allies had broken the back of the U-boat menace. Even after being promoted to Grand Admiral, and later becoming Hitler's successor, Dornitz would always carry the weight of this failure. Yet, the story of the Battle of the Atlantic did not end with the final torpedo or the last depth charge. It became a testament to human endurance and innovation in the face of overwhelming odds. The convoy system, the codebreakers at Bletchley Park, the merchant mariners, the Royal Navy, and the United States Navy, all had played their part in turning the tide of war. Post-war reflections in the years after the war, those who had served in the U-boats, as well as those who had hunted them, reflected on their shared experiences. Many had grown old, far removed from the icy waters and the deafening silence of a submerged U-boat. They had been enemies then, but now there was a grudging respect between them. They had fought a battle of survival, each trying to outwit the other in a deadly game of cat and mouse. The sea, they knew, had no favorites. It swallowed men from both sides without mercy, and it was on those cold, unforgiving waves that they had come to understand the fragility of life. A new era with the fall of the Wolfpacks, the Allies gained unchallenged control of the Atlantic. Supplies flowed freely to Britain and the Soviet Union, fueling the final push to defeat the Axis powers. The war continued, but the turning point had been reached. Without control of the sea lanes, Germany's war machine began to sputter, and the days of the Third Reich were numbered. As for the U-boats, those that remained after the war were scuttled or handed over to the Allies. The era of submarine warfare had evolved, but the legacy of the Wolfpacks would remain a dark chapter in the history of the sea. They had been fearsome hunters, but in the end, they too had been hunted. A final word in the cold Atlantic, where so many ships had gone down and so many lives had been lost, the waves now washed over the silent wrecks of U-boats, their hulls rusting away on the ocean floor. The last days of the Wolfpacks had come and gone, leaving only memories, scars, and lessons for future generations. The war at sea had claimed its toll, but peace, hard-won and fragile, had finally returned. The wolves had fallen silent, and the seas, once again, were free. If you're enjoying this story, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue creating content that educates and empowers. To learn more about South Africa's leading accessibility software, and to support our dyslexic-friendly initiative, visit www.polispeaks4u.co.za.